पहले जैसे हम जिक्र कर रहे थे कि वर्ल्ड बैंक ने जो कंट्री पार्टनरशिप फ्रेमवर्क के तहत अगले 10 साल के लिए 20 अरब डॉलर पाकिस्तान को कर्जा देने का ऐलान किया है। और ब्रेक से पहले आपको बताया था कि हमें ज्वाइन करेंगे वर्ल्ड बैंक के वाइस प्रेसिडेंट फॉर साउथ एशिया। इससे पहले भी हमारे प्रोग्राम में आ चुके हैं और वंस अगेन हमें ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं। So let me introduce Vice President of the World Bank for South Asia, Mr. Martin Reiser. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you so much
tonight on the review. And the first question is that under the country partnership framework, World Bank has promised to provide $20 billion to Pakistan in terms of loans or lending is concerned. Is it guaranteed or indicative lending?
It's indicative. We have under the lending instruments of the bank of the World Bank, Pakistan has access to both concessional funds from the International Development Agency and to non-concessional official lending from the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. In the second, in the IBRD, Pakistan has an exposure allocation that corresponds to the size of its economy, its ability to repay. And in the first, in the IDA, it has an allocation that's really commensurate with the size of its population and the level of poverty in the country. And so the IDA funds get replenished every 3 years. And since we don't know what the replenishments in future cycles are going to be, it's an indicative number. But in the past, we've had roughly $2 billion of lending available for Pakistan every year, and we expect that to continue.
So, Mr. Martin, $2 billion is the number that the World Bank has been on an average lending to Pakistan for past many years. Sometimes it is $1.5 billion, sometimes more during the floods time. So what is new this time? There are a lot of celebrations around this number, $20 billion, 10 years. What is different?
Well, the number is not that different. I think what is different is that with this country partnership framework, we have tried to be more selective. We have tried to be more targeted on outcomes, on eventual outcomes, and we are emphasizing more the partnerships both with the private sector and with other development partners. So what we're looking at in this country partnership framework is 6 outcome areas. We have, I think, a dozen indicators belonging to these 6 outcome areas. But in the previous country partnership framework, we had 35 outcome indicators. So you can see how we're narrowing things down to be more focused. And at the same time, the outcomes that we've chosen, for example, reducing child stunting by 30%, these cannot be achieved in a matter of 2 or 3 or even 5 years. They require a longer term commitment, and so we wanted to use this CPF to really create that long-term joint commitment between the government and ourselves. And so that's really what's different. And then, as I mentioned, the third is that some of these outcome areas are well beyond what we can achieve with our own resources. So we're using it really to bring others on board, to recruit others to the same objective, because we do think these are foundational objectives, foundational goals for the future development of Pakistan.
Okay, if I may go...
6 areas that the World Bank this time identified where you would be lending. Half of those areas are actually the responsibility of the provinces.
That's right.
So World Bank is going to lend to the federal government or the provinces?
We have in the past lent to both, and we'll continue to do that.
Okay.
So but the question here is that under the constitution, education, health, these are the provincial subjects now.
Yes.
And there is a debate that under the National Finance Commission, the federal government has already given a lot of resources to the provinces, but at the same time, they didn't take the responsibilities, they couldn't improve the indicators. But the provincial governments had failed in the past, and because of those reasons, the education indicators, the health indicators, what you call the human capital crisis, it's worsening because of, despite the additional money. So why would the federal government take more loans and spend in areas which are provincial in nature, like health and education? What is the reason and what is the justification for the federal government when particularly the World Bank at the same time and IMF both are saying the provincial government should take their own responsibilities?
Well, I think we need to look at the money that we spend really as a catalyst for something much more important, which is the governance and reform, the policy reforms that are necessary to achieve these outcomes. For example, in education, there are important reforms in the way schools are governed, in the way teachers are trained, in the way teachers are monitored and incentivized, that have to do with the way this sector is organized at the local, at the district, but also at the provincial level. And so by putting some of our financial and knowledge resources on the table, we try to incentivize the provinces to work with us on a reform program. And by setting out a target in 10 years that we want to reduce learning poverty from 77% to below 60%, that's a major challenge. And by keeping our focus very much on that long-term objective, we will have the opportunity to monitor regularly whether we're making progress. If we're making progress more rapidly, we have the opportunity to provide resources in other areas that need it. If we're making no progress at all, we need to ask ourselves whether we're doing the right thing and whether throwing the money is the right solution.
The question remains that these subjects are the provincial subjects. So why would the federal government take more loans and further lend it to the provincial governments? And there will be a burden on the federal government in terms of repayment of those loans. So what?
Of course, but the loans are highly concessional, and repayment is over a long period of time. So I think the economic gains from improvements in health and education outcomes far outweigh the debt burden that these loans create. The question is, are we achieving the outcomes that we're set out to do? That's, I think, what we need to be held accountable for, and what we want our government partners also to be held accountable for.
Okay, but this is not the first time that World Bank is providing lending for health and education. You were doing this for quite long period, yet if you see the numbers, for example, still 26 million children are out of school. When the stunted children ratio is 38% and 60% in the poor districts. So what is going to be different this time that we are going to achieve objectives and make a real impact?
Well, obviously it takes two to tango, so we cannot guarantee that we will be successful. But by taking a perspective that's very much tied to an outcome, rather than defining inputs, etc., it's an outcome that we want. It gives us the flexibility to adjust how we go about it in mid-course, but it also gives us the responsibility to monitor what are we achieving, and to have an honest conversation. If we're not getting where we want to go, we'll need to stop doing it and do something else.
But as you know that whenever international financial institutions lend money, they also attach certain conditions. For example, Pakistan is currently under the IMF program, and there are series of conditions.
Yes.
This World Bank initiative, do you think Pakistani government and the provinces will have to meet certain conditions before they are able to get their hands on to these lendings?
So in the social sectors, we have long employed, and with good success actually, results-based financing instruments. So again, this ties very much to what I was saying about the long-term outcomes that we are putting at the heart of the design of this country partnership framework. And the disbursement of the funds is essentially retroactive to reimburse the costs to reach a particular outcome. So yes, indeed, it is conditional, but it's not conditional on passing a piece of legislation or a government ordinance or decree. It's conditional on achieving the results. And then the money flows to compensate you for the costs that you have incurred, as a result giving you the resources to do even more and achieve more. So yes, I do think we work with a certain element of expectation and accountability. I wouldn't want to call it conditionality, because in a sense these are not our objectives. These are the objectives for the people of Pakistan, and the government has signed up to them. So it is our joint accountability, but there is accountability in the process, absolutely.
जी, यहाँ पर एक छोटी सी ब्रेक लेंगे और ब्रेक के बाद हमारी डिस्कशन जारी रहेगी.